Sarah hasn't spoken to her brother in 3 years. Not because of abuse, not because of money. Because in November 2020, he voted differently than she did. They grew up in the same house, shared the same parents, the same childhood memories, the same Thanksgiving table. Now the table has an empty chair. Michael stopped talking to his best friend from college. 20 years of friendship ended over a Facebook argument about masks and mandates. Jennifer's family doesn't invite her to Christmas anymore. Not because she's cruel, because she's conservative, and they've decided conservatives aren't welcome. These aren't outliers, they're data points. In 2020, roughly 4 in 10 Biden and Trump voters reported having 0 close friends who supported the other candidate. Not few friends. 0. Less than a quarter said they had more than a handful of cross-party friendships. This isn't about policy anymore. It's about identity. And when identity becomes tribal, democracies stop negotiating. They start choosing sides. So here's the provocation. The idea that should keep you awake tonight. America might not collapse. It might consolidate. Become stronger, wealthier, more coherent, more powerful, and profoundly, irrevocably less democratic. Rome did it. Why couldn't we? Let's start with what we can actually measure. Because this isn't speculation. This is sociology. In 2020, about 40% of partisans on both sides had not a single close friend who voted for the other presidential candidate. 4 in 10 Americans are living in ideological echo chambers so complete that the people they confide in, celebrate with the people they'd call it to 'em all, think like them. This isn't about acquaintances. This is about your inner circle. And increasingly, that circle is ideologically pure. One long-run trend shows the fall. In the early 1990s, roughly a third of Americans had close friends across the divide. By 2020, the share had dropped into the mid-teens. We're not just disagreeing, we're segregating. Now let's talk about love. Politically mixed marriages fell from around 30% in 2016 to the low 20s by 2020. Marriages between Democrats and Republicans specifically are a tiny single-digit slice. In 2020, roughly 4 in 10 strong partisans said they would be upset if their child married someone from the opposing party. Go back to 2014, and you'll find that among the most ideologically consistent Americans, roughly a quarter to a third were unhappy about an opposite-party marriage in the family. We're not just sorting our friends. We're sorting our bloodlines. Emily and Jason met in college. She organized. He was apolitical. They married. 2 kids. By 2020, dinner time became a minefield. Every news story, every policy debate tension. The arguments got louder. Then quieter, the dangerous kind where resentment calcifies into contempt. They divorced in 2022. The lawyers wrote irreconcilable differences. They meant irreconcilable worldviews. The academic term is affective polarization. How warmly or coldly you feel toward the other party. It's getting colder. Fast. By 2022, large majorities on both sides viewed the other not as wrong or misguided, but as a threat to the nation's well-being. When you see opponents the way your ancestors saw enemy tribes predators, not partners, compromise becomes treason. We also wildly misperceive each other. Studies show both sides overestimate how extreme the other is projecting caricatures built inside media bubbles. We're not fighting real people. We're fighting hallucinations. Now, the edge case that should unsettle you. In late 2023, about 23% of Americans agreed that because things have gotten so far off track, true patriots may have to resort to violence to save the country. Among Republicans, roughly a third agreed. And after the 2024 election, meaningful minorities on the left also told pollsters that political violence might be justified under certain conditions. That's not fringe anymore. That's mainstream. Here's what all of this means. The social infrastructure that makes democracy governable cross-cutting friendships Mixed families, overlapping identities is disintegrating. When the fabric thins, institutions tear faster. And when institutions tear, people start looking for stronger thread. But here's the darker turn. We can't even measure our own decline objectively. Ask a conservative for examples of political violence, and you get one list. Ask a progressive, and you get another. Both lists are real. Every event happened. The fight moves to categorization. What gets called terrorism? What gets called civil unrest? What gets counted? Who counts it? Which incidents get studied? Which get amplified? When measuring tools are captured by tribe, you're not having a policy disagreement anymore. You're having an epistemological crisis. If each side believes with data they trust that the other is more violent, then every escalation feels like self-defense. See burning cities, see a stormed capital arrive at the same conclusion. We're under attack. Normal rules don't apply. That's not a debate. That's a spiral. And spirals accelerate. How does polarization actually kill democracy? It's not dramatic. It's structural. Imagine you're a member of Congress in a safe district. Your real election is the primary. Do you compromise or do you escalate? Compromise gets you primaried. Escalation gets you re-elected. The rational choice is conflict. This isn't about bad people. It's about bad incentives. Now layer in media. Moral-emotional language outrage spreads faster than nuance. Algorithms reward rage. Outrage drives clicks. Clicks drive revenue. Conflict is profitable. Voters retreat into bunkers. We watch only our news. Follow only our tribe. Block anyone who disagrees. It feels like self-care. It's actually self-sorting. Once your entire diet confirms that your side is righteous and the other is evil, compromise becomes impossible. Because compromising with evil isn't pragmatism. It's collaboration. Where does this leave us? The United States is rated a flawed democracy. Freedom scores remain high, but are choppy and sliding. We're democratic in form, brittle in practice. Both parties erode norms. On the right, denial of results, restrictive voting rules in the name of security, threats to criminalize opponents, pressure on certification. On the left, court-packing talk, governance by administrative workaround, rhetoric that delegitimizes winners, public-private speech policing. Each side thinks it's defending democracy from the other, and both may be right to be afraid. When a system becomes brittle, two things can happen. It shatters or it hardens. Today, let's talk about hardening. Picture Rome, 133 BC. A populist leader named Tiberius Gracchus tries to pass land reform to help the poor. The people love it. The elite Senate, the 1%, despises it. Riots break out. Tiberius is clubbed to death in the street. 10 years later, his brother Gaius tries again. He meets the same fate. Thousands are executed without trial. This is where the hardening begins. The political factions, the optimates and the populares, stop being opponents and become enemies. Politics spills into the streets. Assassinations become a tool. Generals start marching their armies on Rome itself, Marius, Sulla, Pompey. The Senate becomes paralyzed, unable to govern. The public is just exhausted. Then, a man named Julius Caesar steps onto the stage. He understands something fundamental about human nature. People crave security more than they care about political procedure. He crosses the Rubicon River with his army, a point of no return. He wins the ensuing civil war and centralizes power. But here's the clever part. He doesn't abolish the Republic. He lets it continue as a kind of political theater. The Senate still meets, but it has no real power. Of course, we all know what happens next. The Ides of March. A group of senators murder Caesar, claiming they're saving the Republic. But the Republic doesn't come back. Instead, Caesar's adopted son, Octavian, later known as Augustus, takes over. He's even smarter than Caesar. He doesn't call himself an emperor or a king. He calls himself first citizen. He keeps the Senate, the elections, all the old rituals. But he controls the army, the treasury, and most importantly, the narrative. And Rome, desperate for stability after decades of chaos, accepts it. This begins the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. It's followed by a golden age of aqueducts, roads, literature, and art. The bargain was simple. Trade freedom for security, chaos for order, democracy for empire. And for most Romans, it was a price worth paying. Why? Because here's a hard truth. Humans don't have a natural love for democracy. We love safety. We love prosperity. We love not having to argue about politics at the dinner table every night. Democracy is hard work. It demands constant vigilance, compromise, humility, and active citizenship. Empire just asks for one thing: obedience. And obedience is easy. So, let's talk about America's future. Pundits love to predict either a total collapse or a second civil war. And maybe they're right. But history shows us a third path: consolidation. Imagine two forks in the road. Fork A is fragmentation. In this future, every election loss is seen as illegitimate. The government grinds to a halt. Protests and unrest become the new normal. Blue states and red states become like different countries with different laws on abortion, guns, and voting rights. The federal government becomes a joke. We have multiple Americas living under one flag. Then there's Fork B, the Caesar option: consolidation. A genuine crisis hits. Maybe it's economic, maybe it's a foreign threat, maybe it's social breakdown. Fear reaches a tipping point. A charismatic leader emerges, promising to restore order from the chaos. They don't abolish democracy. They absorb it. A right-leaning version might look like this. They tighten voting rules to secure elections, expand the president's emergency powers, and aggressively police protests. They pressure media outlets they see as hostile, reshape the courts, and discipline universities. Then, when crime rates fall and the economy grows, they declare victory. A left-leaning consolidation could look different. They might expand the power of government agencies, reform the Supreme Court, and govern through expert rulemaking instead of messy legislation. They might use algorithms to suppress what they define as harmful speech and partner with corporations to enforce social values. Then, when healthcare access expands and climate goals are met, they too declare victory. Here's the scary part. Both versions can work. Both can feel normal to the people living through them. And in both scenarios, power keeps accumulating at the center, because the crisis that justified the power grab never fully goes away. But the most sophisticated truth is that these two paths, fragmentation and consolidation, can happen at the same time. You can have a strong, centralized state managing a deeply divided and fractious culture. In fact, that's how most empires actually function. Let us paint a picture of the year 2040. The American economy is the envy of the world. The military is unmatched. Our infrastructure gleams and our technology dominates the globe. Elections still happen. The news still covers them. But everyone quietly understands that the real power isn't with the voters. It's in the permanent government bureaucracy, and whichever political coalition is currently steering it. In this future, dissent isn't illegal. It's just inconvenient. Express the wrong opinion, and you might find your career stalls. Your social media posts suddenly get no reach. Banks become hesitant to give you a loan. It gets harder for your kids to get into good schools. It's not overt punishment. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's friction. The press is still technically free, but a combination of corporate consolidation and self-censorship keeps it tame. An opposition party exists, but they rarely win any election that actually matters. And most people are okay with it. Groceries are affordable, the streets are safe, and their jobs are steady. Politics used to be exhausting. Now, it's just handled for them. This isn't a dystopian nightmare. It's a Pax Americana, and it could last for centuries. So what do we lose in this bargain? Pluralism. The beautiful, messy idea that people with fundamentally different values can coexist and share power. That dies a quiet death. Knowledge narrows as universities and scholars self-censor to align with the prevailing narrative. The deep divisions that started the whole process don't heal. They just freeze. One side wins, and the other retreats, waiting for a turn that never comes, because the rules of the game have been subtly but permanently changed. The data shows we are already on this path. Studies show that about 40% of strong partisans have zero close friends on the other side. The number of people who would be upset if their child married someone from the opposite party is at an all-time high. Majorities on both sides see the other party not as opponents, but as a threat to the nation. Trust in our core institutions is at rock bottom. These numbers aren't a prophecy. They are a diagnosis. They tell us that the social infrastructure holding our democracy together is crumbling. And when that happens, political systems either collapse or consolidate. History suggests consolidation is far more common and far more durable. This brings us to the question we've been avoiding. Will America's polarization end in civil war, or will it end in empire? The uncomfortable answer is that we are already choosing. Every time we unfriend someone over politics, every time we refuse to date, hire, or even listen to someone from the other tribe, every time we retreat into our media echo chambers, every time a political norm is broken, and we cheer because it was our side that did it. We are making a choice. Cumulatively, subconsciously, we are casting our vote. Rum's final lesson is this: you can survive your crisis. You can emerge from it stronger, richer, and more powerful than ever before. You just might not emerge as a republic. The senators who killed Caesar thought they were heroes saving Rome. In reality, they just accelerated its transformation into an empire. We are standing at that same crossroads. The republic is bleeding out on the floor. The question isn't just whether we can save it. The question is, what are we willing to become instead? Maybe empires don't just fall. Maybe they evolve. And maybe, just maybe, we've already decided which way we're headed. Look at your friendships, your family, your media diet. Look at your own willingness to compromise. The future isn't being decided in Washington, D.C. It's being decided in your life, right now, every single day. Democracy doesn't die in darkness. It dies from exhaustion. It dies when the people tired, scared, and desperate for a little normalcy, traded away for something that promises to work. They always have. The real question isn't whether America will fall. The question is what we'll call whatever rises from its ashes. Thanks for watching. If this gave you something to think about, consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. See you next time.